First of all, welcome everybody to this particular session, which is called Next Level Technology and Technical Systems. And just so you know, we've got John Unger from Shermco Industries, Justin Lasnier from Illumina Software Incorporated, and Tyson Liske from Variable. And so welcome to all of you. I'm so glad you can participate with us today. Even before we get going, I'd like to kind of get a bit of a bit of a reflection on your topic, and on this particular topic, if I could ask each one of you to take a few minutes and just kind of share your initial reflection on the particular topic that we have today. And maybe Tyson, if I could start with you. And
yeah, you bet. Appreciate it. And thanks so much for the introduction and for the welcome to this time. As far as adopting new technology and how that plays into safety and risk mitigation and liability, really how we see it on Variable side is looking for new ways of adapting and adopting new technology to be able to stay on top of emerging trends. Variable really tries to take new and creative options and ways to be able to look at challenges that exist in the marketplace, but then take complex systems and processes and then figure out how to streamline them. So our team really digs into how do we problem solve? How do we take pain points and industry challenges, and how do we create it as streamlined as possible to be able to provide 100% accountable and collaborative accountability? How do we take individuals, organizations, and other organizations, governing authorities, et cetera, and be able to create an ecosystem of collaborative accountability? So all that to say, we look at creating a collaborative ecosystem that provides 100% accountability. So you have individuals, organizations, and governing authorities really working together. So look forward to the discussion today. I'll have some more to share and a bit of a slideshow later if there's time.
Okay, sounds great. Justin, and yeah, apologies for that, folks. Justin, your thoughts, just kind of opening up the session here.
Yeah, I won't go in too much details to begin with. It is a very interesting and exciting topic. I mean, we've got, an hour or however many minutes we've got to talk about it. Don't get me started, because I could literally talk about safety all day. It's what I do as a job, but it is definitely a passion. I think I probably get it from just the way I was raised. And I don't necessarily think it's something you can learn in school or in books. I think it's definitely something that's within my person, and within our company, that's something that we track when there's a new supervisor that's onboarded. There's an audio book that they go through, and then some training. And I'll just give you a little bit of insight on our culture. And this is not it's not part of the technology side of things, but it is interesting. It is kind of neat that we have an audio book instead of a regular book that you're reading, though. But there's different layers, and level 1, 2, 3, 4 safety is, you do it level 1, for example, just because you don't want to get fired. And level 4, for example, you wear your steel toe boots when you're cutting your grass at home, type of thing. So let's say I'm more on that side of things. Safety is where it's at. I mean, focusing on this particular topic for today, things are moving quickly. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of opportunity to prevent incidents, to manage incidents. If we're talking about new technologies related to vehicles, new safety systems to track and maintain data, new systems to inspect and do preventative maintenance for equipment, training, which you guys are very familiar with, and you're doing a great job at adapting during these COVID days. So, I mean, I'd love to dive a bit deeper into all of the points that I brought and more, but as an intro, I think I'll leave it there. So thanks for that.
Okay, thanks, Justin. And John, your thoughts?
Hey, thanks for having me on. Tough to follow these gentlemen's resumes, that's for sure. Yeah, much like these other two gentlemen, we've kind of been forced into a time where we need to evolve very, very quickly. So what happened, kind of at the start of the pandemic, is where we kind of just got a kick in the butt. Like, one thing we know for sure is safety doesn't take a break because there's a pandemic, right? So how do we mitigate the hazards of what's going on with the pandemic, and yet still be able to produce training, make sure our people have the skills that they can, take to the field, to our boots on the ground, and as well as how do we share all our safety training with clients and things like that. So lots of fun stuff, lots of different things, much like these guys are saying. But I think we'll talk more about it as we kind of go along here.
Sure. Well, I appreciate, John, thank you. And I appreciate all of you, sharing those initial thoughts, and maybe what I'll do is I'll jump to a question here that a couple of you, because of you said, it kind of triggered this for me. And John, if you don't mind starting off with this one, and if, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen since you've entered the industry in this space? If you could maybe share for a few minutes with that.
Ah, just evolving from, as far as health and safety systems are concerned altogether. One thing that many people always hear is documents, or field documents are always living, right? They're always changing. They should always be updated. But the actual system itself as well needs to be. We're almost to the point where, paper stuff is archaic, is what we're starting to see, and there's so much good management systems out there. And we've gone as far as where we're piloting a VR system right now with a client that our engineers from the office can be boots on the ground from their office, and they can share drawings and look at switch gear and things like that. It's changing just so rapidly. And I guess that's kind of the biggest thing is just kind of making the whole system better and more current.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Tyson.
A couple things come to mind. I don't pretend to be an expert in the marketplace whatsoever, but really work at how do we collaborate and work together. And so two things really come to mind. And the first one being, I believe that there's much more of an awareness of technology and how it can be beneficial, but also the ability and desire to adopt it. There's been resistance in the past as far as creating new systems and processes and what that looks like. But what we're finding is there's a lot more interest in actually utilizing new technology and new ways of communicating and collaborating. And to that end, second to that would be there's a need for that accountability. And people are identifying that when it comes to safety, that they want to have that clarity and accountability really well laid out for individuals, organizations, governing authorities. And so with that new adoption and with the new desire to really work and collaborate with 100% accountability, there is changes and new transitions in the marketplace that I believe are well and right for those who wish to be leaders in the marketplace. And when it comes to safety and safety leadership, those who adopt, move quickly and adapt and move into the new technology, I think really will rise as leaders in the marketplace.
Yeah, I could certainly see the benefits, not just in the safety side, but them as being competitive as a company in the marketplace, having those things. So those are some great points, Tyson. And Justin, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I can't say that I've been in the industry for as long as some of the other panelists here. And building on to some of the other points that were discussed, for John, for example, talking about documentation and things like that, and some of the other points from the other John on the previous panel, where a company's EHS policy, instead of having that documentation printed and available on the work site, and having a difficulty of tracking some of the changes, I've seen some movement going towards an electronic version of an EHS manual, keeping that, for example, on SharePoint or some other software, being able to provide policy updates in real time, making those available instead of changing out, the PP policy out of the manual, making sure that's up to where it should be. So it's very time consuming if you're doing that paper format instead of on SharePoint, for example. So keeping that the newest information available, I think, is definitely a benefit, and is one example of the recent changes, I guess. But in terms of other changes that I've seen over time, I've worked as a sole proprietorship. I've worked for big companies like Illuma Safeway. Currently working for Illuma Safeway. I've worked for small mom and pop companies that are, just their own company type of thing. So it varies, I think, from one company to the next. Even in the public sector, public versus private sector, you might see some differences. So, I mean, to generalize that one company versus the next, we're not all going to be talking the same language in terms of what technology means. So, but I mean, online training is huge right now. We've been seeing a lot of virtual training, and I remember when CSTS was really, the thing, CSTS online. I remember taking that and was just blown away how it was so efficient and easily accessible from a computer. I like that, jumping into the construction industry. And it's just, we're so far past that now. We're taking, fall protection online, and different courses that, I really didn't think we could do. Looking back at a few years ago, I was considering taking a fire extinguisher course, but I would have had to travel outside of province, and there'd be hotel costs and travel costs and things like that. And now there's, there's fire protection training online. There's different types of courses that are just more readily available. It just makes things way easier in terms of the training side of things. Another neat one would be audiometric testing. I think that's one that's not talked about enough, but it's one that can be taken online. And you see some of these softwares that can be used in conjunction with calibrated earplugs, or no, not earplugs, headphones. And so you can actually test somebody's hearing and have all that data and do that from in-house. So I think that's pretty interesting, where things have shifted, where cost-wise, I think some of those companies might see these new products as a very appealing product, where you're able to do things in-house, and it's kind of an advantage to some of these safety practitioners, where you're able to say, I can do the audiometric testing, fire extinguisher training, and inspections. It brings up your value as a safety person. And I would just recommend keeping on top of all the new technologies and training in order to further your career.
And let me, if I can stay on this for a bit on this particular topic, but just pivoting a little bit more into the future. And what do you think would be happening over, let's say, the next 5 or 10 years in construction safety, and as more innovative technical systems and management practices roll out? Do you have any idea, perspective, just your thoughts on how you see that over the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, so some of the current programs that are utilized, and I think are going to be utilized more widely, would be some of the behavior-based observation programs, where employees are utilizing some sort of paperwork or on a tablet, documenting observations in the field. So it's a way of motivating the field and keeping that data connected to management and owners, so they're able to see in real time what's actually happening, that some of these at-risk situations are being corrected. A way that you could utilize that data, and that's some of the important thing is, you are fixing the issues, but the new thing would be, how are you utilizing that data? So if you're able to capture on a Thursday afternoon, we seem to be getting way more input or way more incidents on those particular days, or it's an age group, or it's a certain location. October's terrible, whatever it is, you're able to harness all that information out of there. Or you're even on a positive side, you're able to harness, these guys are really high achievers. They seem to be catching more at-risk situations than anybody else. I mean, it's a good way of rewarding some of your staff, and a great way of ensuring you can highlight those successes as well. I think oftentimes we'll take some of the negatives and highlight those, but it's also important to highlight some of the positives as well.
No, that's a great point. The fact that you can, maybe capture some trends. You can, sometimes we try to use the term predictive analytics, but if we're seeing a pattern that something good or bad happens on the Thursday, maybe we could take a little more concentration on what can we lever out of that, whether it's a positive pattern, or if there's a negative situation that we can respond to in advance, so we can prevent something from happening, or encourage more good behavior if that's what we're looking at too. So, John, if I could jump to you.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, all really great points, actually, as Justin was laying out there. One thing we're starting to see, which is pretty interesting, is how do we model some things? And I'm going to speak very specifically about electrical. It's pretty rare you get a second chance in high voltage stuff or industrial electrical situations, but holographic modeling or virtual reality modeling, whereas you put workers in a situation where they are able to make those mistakes, and show them, or I don't want to say, you can model the mistakes. What happens if that selection of grounds is wrong? What happens if you don't lock this out and, it's accidentally touched with something? You can model that arc blast. You can model that arc flash. You can put people in situations where, they're like, wow, like, this is why we do these things,
Right.
Just to be able to model that for workers in that type of way, where it's almost virtual, where they're actually hands-on virtually, switching things, touching things, and seeing what the effects will be. I think that's mind-blowing, to me anyways. That's a big advancement, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, we've, as you know, at the SCSA here, we've been making some investments in VR and VR growth, and some articles we've written about confined space environments or other environments like that, and partnering with a company here where we could put somebody in a very dangerous scenario, quote unquote dangerous scenario, have them execute a task or a series of tasks, and allow them to make mistakes in an environment where the repercussions aren't going to be that I'm going to lose a limb, get a serious injury, lose a life. And the fact is, in those environments, they're very vivid, they're very immersive, and you remember them very clearly because so many of your senses are involved with it. So, great points there, John. And Tyson, your thoughts?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I definitely echo Justin's sentiment when it comes to data and be able to collect it and predict it and know where trends are going. Definitely a big part of it. I was sitting around the supper table with my kids last night, and we're talking about technology and the advancements thereof. So the question of where we're going to be 5 to 10 years, I honestly have no idea, but there's trends moving. It's going so fast. But a few things that I think emerge is from a connectivity perspective, that people are more connected to their organizations and more connected to the things that they have as far as requirements on them, that there's that connectivity of information readily available in people's hands wherever they happen to be, and adds to operational oversight, that now managers, directors, associations have access to that information as well on the fly. So you're making real world, real-time decisions, and be able to mitigate risk and really avoid situations before they become problematic. Another thing I think with technology that we're seeing is having people and individuals empowered to take control of the decisions that they're making. So it's less mandated, it's less, you have to follow these certain rules, which are good and well supplied, but more individually, people stepping up and saying, these are the things that I need to take control of, and have individuals empowered, encouraged, inspired. And as Justin was saying, also looking at ways of celebrating those things as well. So when we have the technology really working in action, individuals want to be about that. It's not mandated as much as it's individuals taking ownership and control of their health.
Yeah, those people being encouraged and supported and taking a lead in those moments when those decisions need to be made. I find it really interesting as you talk about with devices and the mobility and the distance that we're able to cover and the movement of data, in construction, and I think it was mentioned in a panel, our panel last week, where the concern around productivity in the construction sector, we have not experienced the same gains in productivity as maybe some other industries have, and a lot of it I think has been connected to the use and application of technology, and having these mobile devices that are available to us. If we're able to exchange and use the right information, we can contribute to some of the productivity, in terms of opportunities we can contribute because of that, because people can make decisions on the ground with good information, good support, etc. So thanks for saying that, Tyson. Next question for you, gentlemen, and it really has to do with the construction supervisor, and the hat that another leadership role in the organization. Just in your thoughts, and maybe I'll start with you, Tyson, on this, but what do you see as the number one way a construction supervisor can make a difference to the safety of workers using safety systems?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been out of the quote unquote construction world for a few years now, and far more into the technology side. So you'll find me in an office much more often than on the work site. But when it comes to the supervisors and their role with staff specifically, and being able to use systems and processes and having things in place, I think it really gives the opportunity to have inspiring leadership. And so kind of as I was speaking to, instead of things being mandated and pushed down, rather you have a leadership opportunity to be able to inspire and encourage. And so as you have those systems, processes, technology in place, to be able to be a leader in that, not someone who necessarily says what has to happen, but shows how it can happen, and be able to walk through and make people more familiar with the systems that are in place, more comfortable and how they utilize them on a regular basis as well. And so I see that supervisor being not just from a top-down approach, but more from a coming together and an inspiring up of how you show what those safety experiences and also processes really can do. And so I see that a bit of a change, maybe culturally a lot of times, and not just do as I say, but to be able to show how it can work well.
No, that's fair. That's a great assessment. Justin, I'll ask you the same question. Number one way construction supervisors can make a difference, using safety systems.
Yeah, so I'll bring up a few points on that. For example, a QR code used on a scaffold tag. It seemed to be a technology that was going to disappear about 10 years ago. It was popular, then it came back out of nowhere, for me personally anyways. But it is back. I think the QR code is back, and it's going to be utilized for a lot of things. We see it oftentimes for restaurant menus and things like that. But putting a QR code, for example, on a scaffold tag is a current technology where the client can come up to the tag, read the tag, but also scan it, get some information on the duration of how long the scaffold's been up, who requested it, location, pictures, a lot of different information that can be pulled from there that typically you would have to make a radio call, or you would have to go to go see the contractor directly to get that information. So be able to get that information sooner. Some of the clients enjoy that for safety reasons. They're able to say, this was inspected or it wasn't, or cost side of things, they're able to say, it's been up for too long, who requested it, so I can get it torn down or dismantled, I should say. I was going to build on that in terms of QR code, and I think a lot of companies are utilizing it in terms of giving the ability for workers to scan and complete a self-assessment prior to coming to work, experiencing any kind of COVID symptoms. It's an easy way of quickly scanning a QR code, getting onto a website, and completing that information. And it just gives everybody that peace of mind where that's being done. And again, just relating back to your question, that's typically at the supervisor level. Supervisor is able to ensure these things are being completed, and those are based on policies and site-specific requirements. So there's a lot of responsibility, a lot of weight on the supervisor's shoulders from even before the worker gets to site at this point, when we're talking about COVID and COVID symptoms. That being said, there's a lot for the supervisors to handle. A lot of the time, supervisors will be responsible for the vehicles, will have that additional responsibility of being the assigned driver. In terms of new technologies and safety related to vehicles, I'll just bring up one more point, how there's different sensors and backup cameras and whatever else. I think different sensors and mirrors, little lights that will flash on your mirror to make sure you're not getting any kind of collision. So, I mean, that is a good step. I think that's being taken and making the supervisor's job sometimes a bit easier. They already have a lot to worry about. So if we can just avoid any incidents, motor vehicle incidents for any drivers, I mean, that's definitely a positive thing to consider.
Thanks. And I'm going to, John, after asking, I'm going to pivot again to focus again a little bit more on the supervisor a bit more, but John, like your thoughts on how supervisors can make a significant difference in safety using some of these new safety systems.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you asked this. We've put a fairly significant amount of time into this, and I'm going to kind of steal a saying that we learned from a Walmart safety training thing. He called it MOHI, so moments of high influence. Your supervisors really need to be, your biggest champions of your safety management systems, right? Every influence or every conversation they have with workers is a high influence situation. If the supervisor's believing in it, it's going to be very easy to champion that product, right, to your workforce. So having those open and honest conversations with your supervisors, what's working, what's not, really having their back on a good system that works well for the company, but has to work extremely well for the workers. If they're not seeing value in it, or it's cumbersome or anything like that, the value is going to be gone very, very quickly, is what we see. So, another term we use is managed by walking around, having those supervisors have those conversations, championing the tools that we have and things like that. So supervisors do have a lot on their shoulders, and we have to try and just make it as good and usable for them as possible. If they can achieve their goals, I don't want to say easily, but comfortably, we got work to do. So
their focus as supervisors is very much on people, and the systems are there to try to support them, and so the weight on the shoulders of the supervisors got to be tremendous at times. And so it actually, what you're saying just rolls right in really my next question about supervisors. And John, in some ways, I'm going to ask you just to continue saying what you're saying, because I think you're going down this road. But particularly for a new supervisor or a newer supervisor, I mean, the challenges are can be daunting enough. And a lot of people are going to be just scared, going, I got to know so many things. And current supervisors saying, oh my gosh, I didn't expect this scope of responsibility, or I thought I knew what the job was, and all of a sudden I'm in. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I got so much more on my shoulders. And in terms of the change or the switch or the things that have to happen for a person as they step into this role, or if they've been in this role for a long time, but the environment seems to have changed around them. If you got any thoughts on what's the most critical change that a supervisor can or must make to face the future like this really efficiently? I'm just kind of interested, because you're going down that path anyways. So I kind of thought, yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. What you tend to see is workers coming up and becoming supervisors, which is the goal for I would say most companies. You want to make sure we get our workers moving in the right direction and on a career path that they're interested in. Is the excitement tends to end very, very quickly when all the responsibilities all of a sudden land on their shoulders. But you need that support. You need consistent and oh, the word's slipping my mind. But support, you need to give them the tools that they're able to move into that position, right? And it's things like that Ballmer training I was talking about. There's all sorts of behavior-based systems training, the right software tools, really everything that the current supervisor or management know. They need to really open up and share that. What sometimes you see for fear of a worker moving into a position of a management is the management doesn't want to share all their secrets, right? They're just scared they're going to take their job, right?
Yeah,
That's how it usually works. But we can't do that. We need to make sure that we're open. We're giving them all the tools and to make them comfortable and to make them execute and achieve those goals that they're striving for. So.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks on that. Tyson, can I jump to you on that same question?
Yeah, you bet. As I look to it, it's an entirely different skill set that you're building off, not necessarily what you've learned before, but moving into that people management side. So just because you're skilled in the trades or skilled in a certain aspect doesn't necessarily mean you would be a good supervisor. Now it gives you the skills and ability to step into that. And yet it's a different mindset altogether. So it's less in the minutia and far more into the people management, the change management standpoint. And John kind of alluded to that as far as ensuring that people stepping into that role, that you're sharing the information well, that knowledge transfer is happening behind why are we doing what we're doing? And a lot of those why questions and the big overarching ones that people can then take, disseminate, and really distill and to be able to share with workers as they go to ensure that things are going the right direction. So as I see, the biggest thing you can do is prepare someone for a different way of thinking, because they're thinking less about the day-to-day and that minutia and far more about the people management side. And so providing that information, the access to information. And so I believe technology really plays a role in that. So as you're stepping into that, when you have your oh crap moments, you have resources available to go back to on the fly and have those kind of on-demand access. So you have that support, but really it's that preparation thereof, that you're stepping into a new role, thinking in a new paradigm. And I think changing some of that protectionistic type mentality too, where you're not wanting to share that information, but really change that and show new opportunities. And I think people will really rise to the occasion that way.
Awesome. Justin, your thoughts?
Yeah, so we've talked about a lot of good stuff, and just to go a little bit further on some of the points I think we were talking about is, within the construction industry, we're doing quite well at utilizing technology, but not as good as other sectors. You talk about healthcare or education or, just to name a few other ones. I think we've got a long ways to go. There's going to be a lot of changes in the future related to automation or different technologies coming out, and those might seem a little bit scary. And if we're scared of, competing against our workers for losing jobs, we've got a lot more to be worried about in terms of automation coming down in the near future, very soon, actually. But realistically, there's a lot of tools out there for supervisors to get familiar with and to better themselves. To name a few things, the LSE is a great course and should definitely be just the minimum. But as a company, we're currently utilizing a lot of other training, supervisor training that's either performed online, but oftentimes through an instructor-led format. It can be quite difficult for on-site supervisors to have access to a computer to complete the training in that manner. So offering different types of formats is definitely the way to go in order to get compliance and to get completion rates. And so, focusing on topics like stop work obligation, our life-saving rules, fall protection, aiming at some of the topics that are definitely, might be a bit low probability, but high consequence type of incident, targeting those types of things. Not saying that, a little small incident or hand injury is not serious, but focusing on the things that could definitely be life-changing. Going back to stop work obligation training, which I think ties into a strong safety culture. And as it was said, I think by John earlier, is there needs to be leadership in terms of with our supervisors, and additional training, ongoing training can be a little bit overwhelming, but you power through it, you get the training done. As long as management, the owners are on board supporting the initiatives coming out, and I think supervisors will complete what's expected of them. And then the ones that are, higher level safety conscious will shine. And I think the other ones will kind of get filtered out and will either move on or will shine through. So there is a way of naturally filtering out who should be in those roles. So just a few other points.
Yeah, thanks. On the stop work authority, and John and Tyson, I Justin brought up a really great point, and and I guess a question generates from that is, how much do stop work authority or CEO senior management involvement in that respect, and that supervisors knowing they have that authority, that it's embedded in there, how much does that help decisions on site in terms of the effectiveness as a supervisor? And it may be an obvious response, but John, I'd just like to get your thoughts, and then Tyson.
I actually really like how Justin worded that. Ours is called the stop work authority as well, but Justin used the term obligation, and he really nailed it there. Everyone has that obligation to stop unusually dangerous work, right? Like you said, anything life altering or anything like that is definitely a no. But our COO, just speaking directly from Shermco, our CEO sent out a card. It looks like a credit card, and it has his personal cell phone number on it. And he's in the States, and I can tell you that it is used no less than probably twice a month. We do a lot of dangerous stuff with electricity, and sometimes we have to rely on clients, for switching plans or things like that. And obviously, when you're doing maintenance shutdowns and you have a plant that's $1 million a day or whatever the revenue is, and it's down, they can become very pushy. And it's something that we push so very hard is there is no time constraint that we are willing to let you put yourself in danger. So that card, and they're more than willing to use that card. And if they would like to phone, the head of the company himself, his number's on there, and it explains why that card's being brought out. So huge value in it is what we're seeing.
That's big. That's big. Tyson, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as a software platform, really for us, we're trying to be the best digital and virtual reflection of how business actually operates. So when it comes to a question or an unknown of who has the authority from a stop work capacity, as a virtual platform, we're creating it so that people know exactly who they are and what role they're in, what requirements are put on them, so that there's no ands, ifs, or buts. There's a lack of muddiness there. And so when it comes to it, it allows a supervisor to know exactly what their authority is, who they need to contact in which situation, and to be able to follow that so clearly. And everyone knows that from a multilateral communication standpoint, that there's no ands, ifs, or buts. So it just becomes simply clarified of who needs to do what in what capacity, and they're able to function well that way. So for us, it's about how do we digitally reflect how business actually operates in reality.
Oh, awesome, gentlemen, this is great. Just in terms of learning and education, I'm just wondering from each of you, kind of what are the best books or blogs or podcasts or Twitter feeds or anything like that that you plug into, or you'd recommend people plug in to understand technology innovation in safety, and particularly with the construction industry? And maybe I'll start back with you, Tyson.
I'm kind of a mixed bag. I'm all over the place.
Okay.
I think there's tremendous resources to be able to find. I'd say the SCSA is a great resource
Good
to
start.
many, for sure, for sure. But I really look to a lot of thought leaders. And so when you look to new technologies, one of the biggest challenges is change management, and it's how do you adapt and adopt new technology. So I want to look to those people who are on the forefront and who are really looking at new technology. And then it's all about contextualizing it into in the way that you're operating your business. So just because someone isn't utilizing it in your field yet doesn't mean you can't. So I think of thought leaders, whether it's Elon Musk, et cetera, as far as really pushing the envelope technologically wise. But then it's about how do we adapt and change and put this into our context. So I'm a mixed bag. I look to a lot of different places and then try to figure out how do we make this work for what we're doing.
Oh, awesome. Justin, your ideas and things that you look at here as we close things off here.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just add a couple points. So I'm on LinkedIn. I've got, I don't know, 1,500 contacts on there. So for me, that's something that's been growing, and it's been quite nice to be able to utilize. I'm not on Facebook or anything else. So I think LinkedIn's got some good value to it. Learning about some of the different changes within occupational health and safety. So I get some of the information from there, but still it is sort of like Facebook. So you kind of get some of the information that I'm not too sure if you should be trusting all the way. I would echo that statement that the SCSA app and website's got great information. Some of these virtual conferences as well bring a lot of value. I do miss a lot of the in-person conferences, SIMSA events, for example, that brought a lot of experts together and vendors and whoever else. So I do miss that, and I'm looking forward to being able to gather again in the near future. I think that had a lot of value. And some of the internal tools that we have for education and training are definitely important. I've talked about some of our supervisor training. The list is long. We've got over hundreds of courses that are accessible to us just because of the size of our company and just the global footprint we have. Those things are accessible, and I think it's very neat to be able to access those things. But again, I mean, using the local training platforms like the SCSA is, you can't beat that because it is tailored to where we work. It's not so generic, and it is specific to our legislation and Saskatchewan.
Well, thanks, Justin. And John, to close us off, what do you follow? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I'll echo, basically what these guys were saying. I'm a big Elon follower too. And even though, I follow a bunch of different people for a bunch of different reasons on Twitter and LinkedIn, as Justin said, and a number of different platforms and podcasts I listen to. Joe Rogan, and it's not necessarily their beliefs, but their concepts and how they deal with different things, and just how they got to be as innovative as they did. I find that stuff really interesting. You can just pull bits and pieces out of how they got to where they are and where they're going, and just some of their concepts. I just lots of reading. And my final one is Walmart. I'm a big fan of Walmart. I thought that training was phenomenal. Yeah, it's I think we all follow, for the most part, kind of the same platforms to get information. It's just filtering out, as Justin said, filtering out that the good from the bad, I guess.
Oh, well, this is awesome. Thank you, John. Thank you, gentlemen. This has been insightful. I love the energy. I love the thoughts that each one of you had on this, that you have on this topic.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Okay.